Today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at Zelos Watches. Today, we're going to be talking about IWC, a watch brand that I think is grossly underrated, even though their watches are not something that I generally consider for my own collection. And we'll talk all about that, their history as a brand, why I think that they're underrated, and why I personally, even though I'm an advocate for them, I'm a troubadour for IWC, I think that they're good. I'm not being paid for this, by the way, although I would have loved to have been. Why I don't buy them. Right? So let's begin the beginning, I suppose. I think that the IWC inception story is interesting. Now, let me start off with my first point of today's episode. I don't trust any big brand's inception story. Period. End. And I don't blame. I get it. I think, and I'm not saying that this isn't a true story. I'm not saying this isn't a true story. But what I am saying is, there could be a morsel of truth in a very large, beautiful story, and that happens all too often in the watch industry. I don't like stories like that in the luxury space. I think that could, those sorts of structures can work. I don't know, in less expensive consumer goods. Because they're cheaper and you demand less from them as brands, I think, apart from reliability or whatever. But when you're talking about luxury goods, particularly watches, which are so expensive in comparison to, so many other luxury spaces like wine or like handbags, which become very expensive, but their entry point for good stuff is much lower. Watches are expensive. So we demand quite a bit from the brands. I digress. The IWC story, I think, if true, is quite neat. The brand was founded in 1868 by an American watchmaker, which I think is a first. I know that Hans Wilsdorf was he was a resident of Great Britain. I'm not sure exactly where his lineage is from, but generally speaking, these brands are founded right by the Swiss. Now, this is an American watchmaker based in Boston originally. Now, he founded the brand in Switzerland, sure, but the intention of the brand from the brand's inception was to create pocket watches that would be popular domestically. And when I say domestically as an American, I of course mean here, stateside in America. So the whole brand was founded in a kind of a very funny way, and I guess it makes sense, right, that the brand is one of the few brands that does not have an ethnic name, right? Of course, it's International Watch Company Schaffhausen. It's IWC Schaffhausen. That is the full name. And Schaffhausen being, of course, the home of this brand. But it's interesting that we've got this heritage Swiss manufacturer that dates back to the, second half of the 19th century and remains till today and is held in high esteem. And yet it was actually just a brand that was designed to sell to Americans. Kind of cool. Definitely different than what we're used to. We go into their history now. IWC, to my understanding, changed hands quite a few times, and that's neither here nor there. But they were behind quite a bit of innovation, particularly in the pocket watch space. IWC, I think, doesn't get enough credit for both their early pocket watches, like this Jump Hour here, which I think is absolutely beautiful and was a first of its kind. Moving on into the wristwatch category, from their Portugieser watch, which was introduced in 1939, and which was this culturally consistent design, sure, because it was conservative, but it was enormous. I mean, this is a forward-thinking watch design for the time. In 1939, no one was making watches this large. And it's a beautiful design. And I think that its beauty is reflected in the fact that the design has hardly changed since. And IWC has gone on to do wonderful things with the Portugieser collection, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But I think it's very impressive looking back and seeing, I think, how, elegant, ahead of their times they were in many ways, right? In subtle, nuanced ways. The Portugieser was fantastic. Of course, the pilot's watches of the 1940s. Then we go on to the Ingenieur in 1976, which was designed by none other than Gerald Genta. I'm actually not a fan of this watch. I think the Ingenieur, in my opinion, when I say humble, I'm not being facetious. I actually mean this. On this matter, on steel sports watches, I don't fancy myself the authority on what is pretty and what is not. Let me tell you, because I'm not a steel sports watch guy. I mean, I'm wearing a sports watch. It's not stainless steel, although it may look like it, but it's not. But the point is, I think the Ingenieur is a little bit of a mealy-mouthed design, not as decisive as the Nautilus or as the Royal Oak, not as decisive as things that came after it as well from Genta, be it from Bulgari or be it from the Gerald Genta brand or the Gerald Charles brand. I think that the Ingenieur was a bit of a funny one. I think the Constellation that Genta had his hands in, the pole router, these watches were very distinctive. If we're going to pull from Revelation, you are neither hot nor cold, you are lukewarm, and so I will spew you out of my mouth. That is how I feel about that watch. I know that may be a little bit off-putting because it's a popular watch and many of you people probably own that watch, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure that if you looked at my watch collection, you would think that there are plenty of those things are ugly. I mean, I have women's Cartier watches that I wear out because I'm, I don't know, I'm cross-dressing apparently. I don't know why, but it seems to be antithetical to whatever. Not the point. But I don't love the watch. But we can. What's the expression? Decent minds can differ. But decent and cordial minds can differ. They also had this amazing part of their history where they were collaborating with Porsche Design, right? Porsche Design, which is a design house, of course, founded by the folks at Porsche, that I think has since faded. But when we're talking about these old watch designs, with IWC specifically, but other brands as well, Porsche Design was incredible. I mean, Porsche Design, I think, again, they don't get the credit for it, but I truly think that was one of the great design houses in watchmaking history of the 20th century. I truly believe that. These watches were different. They were sporty. They were different. They were divergent, and they were beautiful. Again, whether you like them or not, they were decisive, and they had balance, and they looked at sport differently. I mean, Porsche Design was not trying to be derivative of any other popular sports watch. Porsche Design stood on its own two legs, for better or for worse. I think for better, but neither here nor there. IWC has a rich history. In 2000, I believe, they introduced their Caliber 5000, which I think is actually one of my favorite movements of modern history, right? This 2000 era, that era in time, give or take a few years, was very interesting, right? You got Lange&Söhne introducing the datograph, the watch industry's first in-house chronograph integrated in, I don't know how many decades. Bizarre that this was happening. And I think that in many ways, innovation stagnated after that. But IWC, of all people, not someone that we associate with, not to say that they don't participate in innovation. It's not the point. It's actually the opposite. But I don't think they get the credit as like innovators, really, per se. I don't think that that's their brand. I don't think it's their storytelling. I don't think it's how the brand resonates, right? They resonate as cool pilot's watches, right? And if you know them, they're actually really well made. But that's kind of the extent to which people know about IWC, in my view, especially stepping outside of the circle of hardcore. Today's episode is sponsored by the watch on my wrist, the Zelos Nova 2 with an aventurine dial. This watch is out of control, starting at $799, which makes my dream of owning an aventurine watch come true. I can't believe the attention to detail, the beauty, the subtle branding on this watch. Mechanical ETA movement, beautiful blue guilloche outer dial ring. I mean, this watch is just fantastic. And I said subtle branding. That was one of the first things I said in this video because I meant it. I love the fact that this brand has really let the watch speak for itself, let the aventurine speak for itself. And it's not just in this collection. It's in quite a few of them. It's really in all of them, right? Even their Spearfish, which I think is one of their coolest watches, or really one of the coolest watches on the market, which is fairly new, under $3,000, and it's well under $3,000. This brand is awesome. I had heard about them for the first time on Worn and Wound, which is a watch publication that focuses on, brands that really cater to the approachable segment of the market. I'm a big Worn and Wound fan. I've said that before. And when I saw the brand, I was definitely taken aback. I love their usage of materials. I love their dial architecture, their proportions, everything. But this was the watch that put me over the top. This is the Nova 2. This is the Aventurine. It comes in a multitude of different options. It comes in a salmon, but all of these options have this in common. Perfect proportions, mechanical ETA movement, a price point that is, in my opinion, ridiculous. Prices start at $750. This one is $799 because it has a Aventurine dial. It's just out of this world pretty. I couldn't possibly recommend this watch specifically, but this brand anymore. The more I get into this watch world and the more ridiculous stuff I see, the more I gravitate and the more I'm open to small brands I hadn't heard of before doing really interesting things under $1,000. And this brand is a perfect example of that. I cannot stop staring at this aventurine dial. So I highly recommend everyone go take a look at their entire collection on their website, and specifically the Nova 2, because this watch is just out of this world. I mean, the dial literally looks galactic. It's a great piece. I give you a bit of a background in my thoughts here, and now I want to talk about the two collections that I think are most interesting. There's a third here, the Ingenieur, that I'll discuss a little bit because it is an interesting bit of a subject and it's kind of controversial with their pricing. But let's start off with the two collections that I think do need work. Let's start off with a little bit of criticism, and then let's go into, I think, really fair, again, unsponsored, unpaid. This is non-personal promotion, right, Sammy? This is unpaid, these are unpaid compliments to the brand and what they're doing. We'll start off with the Aquatimer and the Portofino. Now, I actually prefer the Aquatimer to the Portofino, but I do think that these are the two collections in IWC that could use some work, and I'll be a little bit critical. But I'll be fair and I'll be complimentary to the best of my ability as well. Let's start off with this. I'm not a fan of the Portofino case design. I'm not a fan of the design language of Portofino. I'm not a particular fan of, the proportions of the watch. It's a lot of dial. It's very little bezel. The proportions are such that, because the lugs are fairly narrow, proportionally speaking to the wide dial, it's just a proportion. It's just a case design that I'm not a big fan of. And if you look at the rest of my watch collection, you can see that makes sense, right? I mean, I've got my date right here, and I love Rolexes and I love Cartier designs, and the proportions are different. The strap width to dial and case ratio is different. So this isn't to say this is a bad design. I don't know enough about design to make a critical remark like that. But it's not my cup of tea. So I'm going to be fair with that. There are two watches here that I think are interesting. One, the complete calendar, which they make in stainless steel and they make in yellow or rose gold here. I believe that's rose gold. I think that these two watches are interesting. A complete calendar is a triple calendar. It's not an annual. It's not a perpetual, but it is a triple calendar. I think that's a great complication. I think it is a great kind of underappreciated complication. Of course, telling you the month, the day, the date, and in this case, even the moon phase. In stainless steel, we're a little under $11,000, $10,600, and in rose gold, we're at $20,400. I actually think both these watches represent value. Now, I don't think they have great value retention. I wouldn't call them investment grade watches, but I think they are good watches. Going on to the perpetual calendar, $25,000 in stainless steel. Again, value retention wise, I don't think that's that great, but I do think the dial proportions, even though I don't love the case to bracelet proportions, the dial proportions I think are very good. This dial to me is evocative of Longa case to dial design. I think this reminds me of some of the perpetuals there, or annuals. Maybe it's the Saxonia collection. I don't mean to say that it means it's derivative, but I do think that it's, I do think that they have something alike. But of course, they make that same watch in rose gold now again. And now we're at $34,500, which, for a perpetual calendar from, a brand with, some level of prestige, I would say prestige, period. I wouldn't even be mealy-mouthed about it. That's pretty fair price point. I don't think that's unfair at all. I think that there are better offerings out there. I think that JLC's Reverso Chrono, I think, is a better offering. I think it's better. I think they did a better job with that than IWC is with this. But still, I do see the space for it, and I do understand why this is something that someone would want to own, and I do understand why someone would see value in it. Okay, but again, back to square one here. I do believe that the collection itself is a little uninspired. I think that IWC is putting complications on a case design that I don't particularly think is very compelling. It's just my subjective point of view. That being said, I actually quite like this watch in the 34 millimeter, which I imagine is being marketed to ladies, in green. Actually, all the 34 millimeters Portofinos I think are fantastic watches. IWC has done a fantastic job with these pieces. But period end, no conversation about it. That's what I think about that collection. Moving on into Aquatimer, I won't spend a fortune of time here. I do like the way they play with color. I do think their prices are fair, and that's a lot more than I can say for a lot of watch brands. At $6,100, I think that IWC's, Aquatimer automatic, particularly in blue, time only, is a great watch. Do I think it's as good as JLC's Polaris? No. And that's kind of why I'm not a huge fan of the collection, because they're so one-to-one so far as design and purpose. I know that these Polaris watches are quite a bit more expensive, right? This being 6, those being, 10 and 11. And that, I understand that's a big difference in price. And I think that IWC is commendable for not being egotistic and I think a little bit arrogant and trying to like close that price gap and thinking that these two watches are direct competitors and one and the same. The price difference is large enough for someone to say, nah, I want a cool dive watch I can beat up. And I don't really want to beat up an $11,000 JLC. When I say beat up, I don't mean treat with disrespect. I mean like wear in the pool and not have a panic attack every time. Not to say that you should, if you have a JLC, do that. But I understand that the temptation to be anxious is higher when the watch is $11,000 versus 6. Again, not to say that 6 isn't a lot of money. Everyone's always I have to always be so cautious of people thinking I'm being arrogant. And what's the exact fucking opposite? I am in the camp that if you really do want a watch like this, you want a rubber strap dive watch from a great brand, and you're looking at the price difference, 6 versus 10, I do think that you should think long and hard about it and really ask yourself, if you're leaning towards the IWC, am I cheaping out? Assuming those both are within your price budget and you're, kind of juggling between the two options. If one clearly is and one clearly isn't, that's different. But I am generally of the philosophy that, particularly when it comes to watches, which are not fleeting, they're forever, buy the one you truly want. And if that's a $10,000 one, then do that. If it's a $6,000 one, then do that. But, as I've said many times, I always change the numbers here, but I'd rather spend $10,000 than waste 6. Not to say an IWC is a waste of your money, because I don't mean that, but I just mean on a if you're being honest with yourself, which do you prefer? Going on to the Pilot's watches, and I think this is where it gets really, really interesting. I think that IWC's Pilot's watches are some of their best watches, bar none. And I won't bore you with a ton of details here, but what I think is so incredible about this collection is their use of color and their use of material. And those two things go hand in hand, because IWC is huge on using ceramic, be it in their Mojave Desert, be it in their black, be it in their blue, be it in their, green in instances. IWC kicks ass when it comes to color. Period. End. IWC also kicks ass in their Pilots collection in constantly, delivering something or delivering a collection that, while, the two branches of it are, meaning the chronograph, the time only, and then I wouldn't even say that. I would say the aggressive and the conservative, the super sporty and the conservative, they both clearly come from the same place. These are logical brothers, right? Logical cousins or brothers in the same family of watch, IWC Pilots. But there's kind of a Pilot for everybody. Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair statement. Be it a conservative piece on a bracelet that's kind of a Datejust equivalent, maybe a little bit less fancy, so even more to the taste of some, or be it a big Pilot that's aggressive, or these white dials on leather. IWC, even this 36 on leather, that is a dress watch. That is an elegant dress watch. I know this may sound, a little bit crazy, but I think that these IWCs, particularly on leather, this is a Calatrava comp. And I know it's not, because it's not precious, but I get that. But I think the point of those watches, the point of the Calatrava, category, is that they're conservative, elegant, time only. This has a date, but come on. Watches that are elegant. And that's it. They're dress watches on straps. And of course, Calatravas can come on bracelets as well. But, basically that's the formula. And I think IWC is doing a great job. There's a Pilot for everybody. And again, the chronos, which of course I pay a little bit less attention to as a consumer. I'll talk about that in a little bit. They're freaking awesome. That Mojave chrono, amazing. The new white ceramic lume watch, insane. IWC is doing a fantastic job. Again, we'll talk more about my personal opinion as it pertains to my collection in a little bit, but that's where I am on those. And the Portugieser is, again, this is full circle conversation on the Portugieser. This watch is flawless. Is it too big? Yes. Does IWC do a better job with their Pilot collection, delivering diversity and delivering diversity? I don't need to go further than that. Yes, absolutely. But that being said, they do a fantastic job in their Portugieser collection, with color, with timeless design, with elegance. And I'm not saying they should make them small. I'm not saying that, right? The original one was $39 for God's sake. So I'm not saying that. I do think that the Portugieser is off the table for a lot of collectors that, just can't pull off a 40 or 42 or 44 millimeter watch that's all dial. That doesn't mean the design's wrong. It doesn't at all. I don't mean to say that. What I do mean to say is it's just not approachable for plenty of people, myself included, right? I think that the Portugieser automatics with power reserve are phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And silver with blue and all the variations. Silver, blue. The perpetuals are great. Perpetuals are around $25,000 again to start. Fantastic watches. Fantastic watches. Unsung. They're not given the credit they deserve in my view. But they are great watches. Period end, as I like to say. The novelties, which I don't love to talk about because novelties are by definition not available, right? They're hard to get and whatever. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time because why waste breath on things that most of us will never be able to own? Unless we truly wanted to spend so much of our resources of time and money on getting the privilege to own one, but whatever. I'm not doing that, right? But these white gold, kind of ice blue dial, watches, same formula as the rest of the IWC Portugieser collection. So there's nothing to complain about with proportions or dials or anything like that. And it just, for me, the color combination is just unbelievable. And I think it's amazing. And I wonder how Patek Philippe and IWC both said, yeah, maybe like shades of light blue are kind of our thing this year. Kind of funny how those two things happened, right? I wonder what the impetus was for that. I wonder if they both spoke, which I doubt, or if, I doubt that Richemont, the conglomerate that owns IWC, and Patek Philippe, an independent brand that has far higher perceived value, I doubt those two companies spoke. But I also didn't see light blue like written on the walls going into this year. So I don't really know how these two, brands decided on the same end. But they both did a great job. They're absolutely beautiful. They have nothing to complain about. So why don't I buy one? Fantastic question. And the answer is fairly simple. I have no problem looking at something, saying it's beautiful, adoring it, poking around on the internet, singing its praises, and not buying it. I don't, sometimes I do, of course, but generally speaking, I don't have this, insatiable desire to own everything that I think is great. And I know that, can be a bit of a sickness in the watch community and people can feel that way. And I guess the point of the video at the end here is don't feel that way, right? Don't feel like you need to own everything that's great. It's not I don't think that's a healthy way to go through life. It's certainly an impractical way to go through life, especially if you don't make an unlimited amount of money. And even if you do make an unlimited amount of money, even if you do just swimming in bucks, it's kind of gluttonous. And that is a deadly sin if you believe in that sort of thing. And I certainly do. And I don't think it's good for the soul. But I do think it's great. I do think these watches are terrific. And if it's exactly your boat, I do think that you should take a look at IWC. I do think that you should, maybe stroll away from the Rolex section of the frickin' AD for a change. Stroll away from the Patek, stroll away from the Rolex. Don't even go into AP. Who cares? It's a waste of time. Maybe your experiences are different, but you're just going to get talked down to. I suppose there's something in all of us that, like moths to flame, love to, go to things that are dangerous and things that hurt us. So much of the allure of, dating when you're young and that journey of approval. And I don't think that gets old for men. I think that men kind of keep that for the rest of their lives, or at least the men that I know. But I don't know. When it comes to material items, I think that less of better is more. Not less. Not maybe I said that sentence wrong. Less and better is more. So if you've got watches that compete with these, and if you've got redundancy, and you don't think you're going to wear it, like I'm not going to wear the Mojave chronograph. I'm not. I love it. I think it's amazing. I'll never wear it. So why would I buy it? It's a lot of money. Can I afford it? It's the difference. I'm not going to wear it. I don't care if it's $3,000 or $15,000. It's kind of immaterial. I'm not going to wear it. So why would I want that to collect dust? You work hard for your money. I don't mean to make this into like a big, moral lesson, or not moral, but I don't mean to make this into like a big lifestyle lesson about, what to do with your money. Do whatever the hell you want with your money. It's none of my business. But I have a YouTube channel, and every week I have to talk for, an hour or so. So I might as well just go down, right, the tangents of my own consciousness. But anyway, I digress. I think this is a great brand. I'm glad to have given it attention today. The sheer volume of videos that we do does force us, to talk about things that aren't as popular sometimes. I don't know how many views this video will get because IWC, I don't think, is a clickbait company. I don't think we're going to put a lot of effort into making a clickbait title for this. Maybe someone will. I don't know. Maybe Aaron will. I don't know. I suppose that's part of his job. But there's no pressure for me to do that. I love talking about watches. I love sharing my passion with watches for you, whatever insight I can possibly offer. And I guess if you have one takeaway from this video, it's take a look at IWC. That's it. I really should have been paid for this. I know that. I know that now. I know that now in retrospect. See you soon.